Com. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
Did you know that as a federal or state employee, you have the opportunity to support the American Family Association through the combined federal campaign? You can designate a deduction each month to the organization of your choice, and AFA number 12037 is one of the few on the list fighting for your family. Help us continue to do so by designating your CFC contribution to 12037 when completing the CFC form in your payroll department.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio
and Urban Family Talk.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media
and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, the Hamilton Corner.
Good evening. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. I'll give you fair warning. I'm fired up today. I said that to Jay Tross when I walked in the studio. He said, uh-oh. Thank you all for joining us this evening, for spending your time, your drive home with us today. It is a blessing and a privilege. I also want to thank all of you who have called in and provided your listener testimony. There's still time and opportunity for more people. If you want to call in, we're asking for all those who have been blessed by this program, that you enjoy the program. We're asking you to call our listener testimony line. That number is 877-876-8893. Once again, it's 877-876-8893, where you would just leave a voice message sharing how the show has been a blessing to you, how it's benefited you, if it has, of course, if it has benefited you. And our creative team will be able to grab that, produce it, and have it ready to roll for our share-a-thon. Our fall share-a-thon is going to kick off next month. Well, we will begin the program today in Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel, chapter 3. I'm going to focus specifically on verses 12 through 16, but I think it's important to give a little bit of background leading up to this. So first and foremost, the book of Ezekiel is one of the major prophets. It's one of the things that we talk to the children about. What's the difference between the major prophets and the minor prophets? Because they're all significant in God's eyesight. Just we as people, many of the theologians classify them as major versus minor simply based on the length of the book. So the minor prophets are only described as minor prophets simply because their books tend to be shorter than the major prophets. Second thing I want to say is if you look in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 2, you learn that Ezekiel was not a prophet from the very beginning. Ezekiel was a priest, and Ezekiel was called by God to minister to the exiled Jews from the southern kingdom of Judah once they were transported under Nebuchadnezzar. So within those who were taken, along with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and Daniel, which are the Hebrew names for the Hebrew boys that were exiled to Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar, Ezekiel was called to minister to the exiled Jews under Nebuchadnezzar's exile. So just to provide some context for that, secondarily, or to refer back to my first point, Ezekiel was a priest. He was born into the priesthood. But as the exile took place, the Lord called him, transitioned him into prophecy, into being a prophet, which in and of itself is a lesson for us. We have to always make sure that we are in love with the God of ministry and that we don't fall in love with ministry. Because if we are in love with the ministry, and very easily we can turn the blessing, the gift, or the ministry that God has called us to, we can very easily turn that into an idol. And we know that it has become an idol when God calls us to transition. We're saying, oh, no, Lord. Oh, but this priesthood is so lovely. Can you imagine if Ezekiel had said that to the Lord? No, Lord, I'm a priest. How would you transition me out of the role that you born me into? By bloodline, I by right belong in the priesthood. When God is saying, hey, listen, the people have rebelled against me, the exile is afoot, it's time for you to transition into another role. Secondarily, you'll find in chapter 2, the Lord spends a tremendous amount of time just explaining to Ezekiel the depths of his call, explaining to Ezekiel how the hearts of the people of Judah have turned against him, and referring to them as a rebellious house, the hard-headed and rebellious house, and giving Ezekiel the wonderful admonition in chapter 2, verse 5, when he says, and whether they hear you or whether they refuse to hear you, for they are a rebellious house, they will know that a prophet has been among them, which really outlines for us the function of the prophetic voice, the function of the witness of the gospel of the kingdom of God, of the witnesses of God's kingdom, ambassadors from the glorious gospel, ambassadors of the glorious gospel of Christianity, of Jesus Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Our call is to be witnesses. Duty is ours, results are the Lord's. All too often, we allow ourselves, our spiritual self-esteem, and even our emotions, we're up and down based on how we feel we've performed in the ministry. Our call is to faithfulness, not to results. Duty is ours. Our responsibility is obedience. Let God handle the results. But here's where I want to, I had to sneeze. Here's where I want to land for this portion of the program. In chapter 3, verses 12 through 16, I'll read them, then make some comments. Verse 12, then the Spirit lifted me up. This is Ezekiel talking. Then the Spirit lifted me up, and I heard behind me the voice of a great earthquake. Blessed be the glory of the Lord from its place. It was the sound of the wings of the living creatures as they touched one another, and the sound of the wheels beside them, and the sound of the great earthquake. Verse 14, the Spirit lifted me up and took me away, and I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit, the hand of the Lord being strong upon me. And I came to the exiles at Tel Abib, who were dwelling by the Shebar Canal, and I sat where they were dwelling. And I sat there overwhelmed among them 7 days. Verse 16, and at the end of 7 days, the word of the Lord came to me. Verse 17, Son of man, I have made you a watchman for the house of Israel. Whenever you hear a word from my mouth, you shall give them warning from me. That's what I want to discuss for today. So here we go. So as I described in chapters 1, 2, and 3, the Lord basically overwhelmed Ezekiel, overwhelmed him with the condition of the hearts of the people, of the Jewish people, of the people of Judah, consumed him in revealing the great depths, the utter depths of their depravity and their rebellion against the Lord. And Ezekiel said that it impacted him so that it drove him away in bitterness and in the heat of his spirit. In other words, Ezekiel, looking at the condition of his people, he was so stirred emotionally in the heat of his spirit. You read that in the Hebrew, Ezekiel was hot about it. He couldn't believe how wicked the people of Judah had become. Though he was driven in the heat of his spirit, his anger and his emotions did not compel him to begin ministering. The Bible tells us that Ezekiel sat among the exiles and sat where they were dwelling for 7 days before he opened his mouth. For 7 days. Some of you, as you're listening to me, you are racked with the condition of the depravity of our country. As you're listening to me, you are perturbed, utterly perturbed. That really is an understatement concerning the condition of the church in America. That it's almost like, can anybody else see what I'm seeing? Why are we all so content? Why are we all so willing to sit passively by? Going through our routines, acting as if the house is not on fire. Ezekiel had that same position. But if you notice, God reveals this, and everything God shows us in Scripture is for our benefit. The Lord is showing us through Ezekiel's example that alone, not saying that's not a benefit, but that alone is not the thing that should cause us to begin to pour out in ministry. For 7 days, Ezekiel sat. I am sharing this with you because I would suggest that God is allowing you to see this condition so that you would be stirred, but not only have zeal, as Apostle Paul said, but that we would have zeal according to knowledge. We don't want to allow our zeal to move us into acting out of time, acting inappropriately, responding in a manner that though we may have a proper perspective, we don't have the right timing. See, the right thing at the wrong time is still the wrong thing. And the Bible records that Ezekiel sat by the Shebar Canal for 7 days. We have to understand that, and as he sat, Ezekiel clearly was called by God to be a prophet to the exiled Jews. Clearly that God had given him revelation concerning his calling. But nevertheless, the Lord had not given him entree to begin to speak. Very often, we get deceived into thinking that activity is synonymous with productivity. Just because you're moving, it does not mean that you are advancing. All too often, we have this pendulum to where we engage and we back off, and we engage and we back off. Movement is not synonymous with advancement. I am telling you, in this day, in this age, we cannot afford to endeavor to pursue godly things, yet having fleshly motivation driving us. We cannot allow the heat of our spirit, the anger of our emotions, the height of our emotions to drive us into doing ungodly things. It was this that led Moses to strike the rock in the Old Testament during the Exodus when God told him to speak to it. Very often, many of us will short circuit the very calling that God has given us because the Lord is telling us to speak to the rock, but we want to smite it. The depth of the dirty underbelly of the American culture right now. And I have to tell you, this is something I had to wrestle with because operating as a prosecutor, I got to see the dirty underbelly of America. I began to be somewhat jaded concerning people. And the Lord ministered to my soul and just spoke gently to my heart that the very thing that could cause such despondency that the Lord wants to have a harvest among. All too often, we can very well be found cursing the Lord's harvest field. The Lord is saying, yes, you see the depths of the sexual deviancy and the utter lawlessness and the utter rebellion. These are my creation. I want to redeem them. And so the Lord did not allow Ezekiel to speak for 7 days. And then the Bible tells us in verse 16, after he sat overwhelmed for 7 days, at the end of 7 days, the Lord came to me and gave him a word. And the word that God gave him is when he began to engage in ministry. I want to tell you that the time that we're living in, we cannot afford to have a godly perspective, yet have fleshly motivation for engagement. Very often, and I have conversations with pastor friends of mine, and I had one in particular where a pastor was sharing with me about, burnout. He was just burned out. And I was saying, could it be, pastor, could it be that you are undertaking things that God has not called you to do? In our time, we think that the more stuff we do, because that's the way it is in the world, the busier you are, the more productive the world thinks. The kingdom of God is not like that. Elijah was just as much a prophet of God when he was confronting the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel as he was when he was hiding by the brook Cherith. Same prophet, same God called him, had different assignments at the moment. You are just as much a man or woman of God if you are sitting by the Chebar Canal for 7 days as you are when you are proclaiming the word of God. We have to make sure that we not only have the proper perspective, but we have the proper marching orders. That the engagement that we are offering is not coming out of our flesh, but it is God-breathed, God-ordained engagement. If you are a person right now who feels, man, maybe I'm a little burned out, I'm tired of doing this, I would encourage you to recalibrate, to reevaluate everything that you're involved in and see how much of it is God-breathed and how much of it is merely good intentions executed within the church context. There are many of us where we have lots of programs, program after program after program after program. I would encourage you to pause for a minute and evaluate the fruit of the program. Go back to the Lord. Lord, did you offer this? Or did I just, out of my own mind and out of my own heart and out of my own desire, initiate this movement? I believe with everything in me that if we would do that, a lot of us would probably scale back on all of the programs that we're doing. Some of us, we need to just stop everything and just get on our faces before the Lord and say, Lord, I've been trying this. I've been working on this for 40 years, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years. And these are the results. Lord, let me come back to you, back to ground zero, and see what you want from all of this. How much of this is what you want and how much of this is just me? I would suggest that as we are able to kind of get fit and streamline our engagement, that we would have increased fruitfulness. because we're operating according to the Lord's auspices. The not-so-secret secret in the kingdom of God is that the Lord has no responsibility to sustain anything that doesn't originate within himself. Which means that if we step out of that water, step out of the boat into that water on our own, we have to sustain ourselves. And you know how it works in the flesh. If we have to strong-arm it in the flesh, what happens to the flesh? It gets tired. But where the Lord provides the vision, he provides the provision every single time. So I would just encourage you to be like Ezekiel. If the Lord has you standing pat for 7 days, don't fight the 7 days. Don't get antsy. In human nature, we're like, man, I gotta be doing something, No, allow the Lord to steep you. Allow the Lord to fill you so that when you engage, you're going with the unabashed, clear dictates from the Lord.
Children deserve the right to free speech, too. Hi, I'm Matt Staver with Freedom's Call. In a first grade classroom in Indiana, the teacher greeted new students with a memo for their parents. The note forcefully stated that she would not tolerate any talk about God, Jesus Christ, or the devil in her classroom. The letter quickly backfired. Initially, kids were discussing this unconstitutional ban. Then many parents stood up for their children's right to free speech. The superintendent then issued a statement clarifying that these students have free speech rights. They have the right to share their beliefs as long as it does not disrupt the class. Our children have First Amendment rights, and we need to equip them to handle attacks on their freedom. And it's happening more often these days. Learn more about the rights of students in public schools. Visit Liberty Counsel's website at lc.org. Don't be caught off guard. Know your rights and make sure you stand for them. Stay informed at Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org. That's lc.org.
This is a Decency Minute. I'm Bill Johnson. The masses are manipulated by the media, obscuring the facts with an agenda aimed not only to bring down the president, but America itself. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and entertainment figures spouting the hatred and anarchy only further drives our nation to the precipice of destruction. There is only one answer to falsehood: truth. Our only weapon in this battle of ideologies is the light of truth. Unfortunately, many have laid their weapon down. When Christians are more entangled with television and social media than it is steeped in God's Word, we're in trouble. As John MacArthur said, be an expert on the Word of God and you will always know what to say to the culture. The church is supposed to be arming our minds with the truth of Scripture, but you and I have responsibility as well. Study to show thyself approved. This is a Decency Minute. I'm Bill Johnson.
And when you take inventory in order to give thanks, you discover that your loneliness is only one small part of your life, and that God has blessed you with so many things that have showered down upon you that just difficult to sit and sulk in self-pity.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his message, The Lonely Single, on the next Turning Point Weekend Edition.
Listen to Turning Point, Sunday mornings at 7 o'clock Central on American Family Radio.
Friendships is an all-volunteer ministry helping the needy in the U.S. and abroad. There's an opportunity for you to care for Syrian war victims at Friendships Medical Field Clinic and Base in the Golan Heights. Among the positions available are doctors, nurses, dentists, interpreters, as well as personnel for operating the facility. For details, visit friendships.org. or call 337-433-5022. Again, 337-433-5022.
Shining light into the darkness, this is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Let me just go back. But if he was told that, that raises other questions too about propriety, even for
all true. However, here's the tweet. Terrible! Exclamation point. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthy.
Let me ask you a question. Why is whether he was right in some form on that tweet more important than what the information is showing?
Because everyone poo-pooed that this was so out of left field. And everyone thought, where is this coming from?
This says my wires were tapped.
Trump Tower.
Everyone in Trump Tower is his. Does my mortgage company, the mortgage company that owns my house, if my phones are tapped?
There's public space in Trump Tower that does not actually belong to Donald Trump. I just don't think that you can say that this was on a curve.
Yes. Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. The audio you just heard was audio of CNN squirming attempting to spin what could really only rightly be described as vindication for President Trump concerning his wiretap allegations back earlier in the year. Now, remember back when President Trump first made that tweet, as grammatically incorrect as it may be, when he said, I just found out that I had my wires tapped by the Obama administration. And CNN was chief among the mockers. I mean, everybody in the talking snake media went on a barrage of insulting, demeaning, and whatever else description you want to use, attacking President Donald Trump, where it turns out, and this is a story, surprisingly, that CNN broke, that he was right. It turns out that the FBI, under former President Barack Obama, who at the time had as the FBI head James Comey the Clown, did in fact have Paul Manafort, who formerly was President Trump's, then candidate Trump's presidential campaign chairman, had his phone tapped. It turns out that the taps followed a FISA warrant, which is the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, based on the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, where there were two separate FISA warrants, one in 2016 and another in 2017, when Paul Manafort was speaking with President Trump consistently, that his phone was tapped. Now, instead of humbly eating crow, CNN goes on this rampant attempt to say, oh, no, he's not right, because technically it was not his wires that were tapped in Trump Tower. It was Paul Manafort, who had a residence in Trump Tower, and he also has a residence in Alexandria, Virginia. But it was at the time when President Trump was speaking with Paul Manafort on a regular basis. And so the evidence shows that it's very likely, because you don't have in the legal spectrum, and let me tell you something, with the federal government, when they conduct investigations, it's different than the state government. The federal government gets all of its evidence and then informs you that you're being charged with something. That's not how it works most of the time in the state side. The state side, they'll make an arrest and then build the case over time. So with the FISA warrant process, there are no wiretaps without recordings. So the fact that it is now demonstrably proven that Paul Manafort had his cell phone tapped by the federal government, that we know for a fact that the FBI under President Obama did in fact have wiretaps that very likely include recordings of President Trump. Now, we don't know whether or not at this point if President Trump's voice is on the recordings, but the likelihood is very probable. Now, aside from the issue about President Trump being right versus he being wrong, can we stop for a moment and think about what's really happening here? So you mean to tell me, because let me say this, there is no way that a FISA warrant could be granted, because in order for the FISA warrant to be granted, that means the FBI had to draft a probable cause affidavit to the secret FISA court, apply for the warrant, and have it granted by a FISA court judge. There is no way that a FISA court application is made without the knowledge of James Comey the Clown, who very well could have once again stepped into another spat of perjury because he testified before Congress that he was not aware of any such evidence that would validate the president's claim. Now, James Comey the Clown may attempt to be slick and say, well, the president claimed that his wires were tapped. Well, we didn't have any knowledge of him being the object of a FISA warrant application. But the facts are, you tap Paul Manafort's phones, man. I mean, come on. And so, again, aside from whether or not Trump is right, can we stop and consider for the moment the implications of the fact that, because let me add this in, there is no way you have a FISA warrant application conducted by Comey the Clown where the President Obama either was not aware of or should not have been aware of it. I mean, just how deep does this rabbit hole go? So we have the real possibility that you have a sitting president using the full scope and heft of the federal government's law enforcement agency that is literally, oh my gosh, acquiring the secret telephone communications of a political opponent. Y'all, This is the type of stuff that happens in Nazi Germany. These are the type of things that happen in communist China, in communist Russia. These are not things that happen in America. And instead of dealing with the reality of this consideration, we have the talking snake media want to go back and forth. Oh, he wasn't right, and want to try to obfuscate what I would suggest is the more important issue. Because in my opinion, this moves us one step closer to a police state. Can you imagine what kind of country we would be living in if you have a sitting administration that has the authority and exercises the authority to spy on its political opponents? Are you crazy? This is what we're talking about. Yet, the Crescent News Network, the Clinton News Network, the Communist News Network, they want to spend time talking about, well, you know, he's not really right, though he's kind of right. He's not all the way right. Man, that's high class, top shelf, grade A foolishness. And I'm sick and tired of the shenanigans to where, once again, the American people are treated like a ping pong ball. Because they think we're too dumb to pay attention to the things that are important. They are so committed to protecting former President Obama, so committed to being the propagandist communication arm of the Democrat Party, so committed to opposing President Trump by any means necessary, they're more than willing to ball the American people up, ball up the Constitutional Republic into a wadded mass of paper and throw it in the trash bin. This is disgusting. This is disgusting. Instead of just saying, man, it seems like the president was right. Now we need to get the additional information and evidence to see what it was that allowed this to happen. You have a FISA warrant application, and the way that they work, that the applications that allow for the wiretaps, they have 90-day expiration time periods on it. So you have a 90-day FISA warrant concerning Paul Manafort's phone. Then it expires because for whatever reason there's not enough probable cause to immediately get a re-up on it. And then you apply again in 2017. And all the while, and this is the thing that's just amazing to me, that they're more than willing to pummel President Trump saying, whoa, that's a ridiculous claim. That's a ridiculous claim. Oh, wiretaps. I mean, the guy is crazy. And it turns out the man is absolutely right. Wiretap on a resident of Trump Tower who just so happened to be the chairman of his presidential campaign at the time. Guys, this is high-level problematic. This is transforming the American Republic right before our very eyes into Cambodia or something. Into Nicaragua under the Batistas. I mean, this is crazy. This is crazy. But that's not all I'm burning on today. And I don't know what's going to happen after this, because I got to tell you, this has me lit. Lit. I'm going to play some audio for you because the congresswoman who never met a Botox she didn't like, I might just call her the Botox Fox, Nancy Pelosi, who was an avid supporter of the DREAM Act. She attempted to quell the concerns of some people within her district in San Francisco. Nancy Pelosi, Democrat minority leader in the House of Representatives. Why and how is she still the Democrat minority leader? I don't know. She had a meeting, and it was on Monday, September 18th, in San Francisco, where she attempted to have a come let us reason together moment with some of her constituents, that many of whom may be described as dreamers. I'm going to get to that in a second, in San Francisco. And I want to let you hear some audio, because it seemed like the Botox Fox might not have may not have been able to curry the favor of the San Francisco Dreamers. Go ahead and play clip 7.
For a long time, we've been fighting the fight for the Dreamers. My colleague. They're not Dreamers. I'm not. All 11 million. Do you want to hear an answer, or do you just want to shout? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. You do not. You don't know what you're talking about.
Uh-huh. What was that? Oh my goodness. It turns out that the mob turned on the Botox Fox. Can you believe it? The mob turned on her. She was attempting to convey her warm and lovey-dovey sentiment for the wonderfully described dreamers. And the first objection you heard, how you like this? The first objection you heard was that the dreamer said, "We are not dreamers." Excuse me? Escúchame. Escúchame. Si habla no inglés. We are not dreamers. That's what they said. The next refrain from the crowd, and I should have explained that the voice of the female that you heard was Nancy Pelosi, and the voice of the others were the crowd. And while she was speaking, they sashayed up to the front and began to shout her down. If you can see the video, they have surrounded her. She has like Secret Service people standing between her and the crowd, but they have boxed her in. And they effectively shut down this event and didn't even allow her to speak. She ended up taking her ball with her Secret Service detail and going home. These people told her, "We are not dreamers." The next immediate shout was, "All 11 million. Now, if you're not aware, 11 million is the number that regressives are using to say that that is the total number of illegal immigrants in America right now. Now, I'm going to just let you know. It's way more than that, my good friend. Far more than that. But, of course, the regressives love to play hokey pokey with numbers when it aids their political arguments. So they'll say 11 million. So in response to the reference to the dreamers, the people who would be described as dreamers by many others in the political parlance say, "Oh no, it's not about the dreamers. We want all 11 million. They went on to shout it down saying, "You're a liar. You mean to tell me you were fighting deportation?" Nancy Pelosi says, "Yes. Yes, I was." They said, "You are a liar. You are a liar." Now, I'm going to try to do my best to keep my cool and take this one piece at a time. The first thing I want to address, I guess let me say it this way. The first thing I want to address is I want to tell you, if you have not heard it before, I want to let you know that the goal of this entire conversation about DACA is not limited to the so-called dreamers. I'm telling you, the objective is to use the dreamer issue as a Trojan horse to give amnesty to all illegal immigrants in America. Now, you want to ask me, how do I know that? I know that two ways. First and foremost, I know that because the Bible explains that lawlessness begets lawlessness. Lawlessness, when given free rein, never curtails itself. Oh, no. Oh, no. Lawlessness expands and metastasizes like stage 4 cancer, unremitting, unstopping, and continues to expand until it consumes the host vessel. That's what lawlessness does. And that's why you saw the so-called dreamers turning on Nancy Pelosi. Because Nancy Pelosi was one of the most strident advocates of the so-called dreamers. But if you give lawlessness an inch, it's going to take a football field per second. Second reason why I know that the so-called dreamers, and I'm going to get to why I'm calling them the so-called dreamers. And now let me say this. I want to open the phone lines in the next segment. So let me give you the number now so you can tee up your phone calls. The number is 888-589-8840. Once again, that number is 888-589-8840. The second reason why I know the dreamers are simply being used as a Trojan horse for amnesty for, as they shouted out, all 11 million, which we really know is way more than 11 million, quite frankly. I have to tell you, when I prosecuted in Houston, and every lawyer in Houston can tell you, you cannot do business in a court of law in Houston, Texas, in Harris County, without having translators on staff. In every court appearance, there are people who enter the courts that cannot speak English in America. Back to my point. The other reason why I know the dreamers are a Trojan horse for amnesty for all illegals is because if you go back to the Dream Act also included a provision called DAPA. There was DAPA and DACA. DACA was deferred action for childhood arrivals, but DAPA was for the parents. I have a sneaky suspicion that this legislation that is talking about DACA, that it's going to have provisions for the adults who brought the DACA children here. Really are not children. They're all adults now. The overwhelming majority are adults. And the third reason why I know that is you heard those people, the Dreamers, they weren't even saying we were advocating for ourselves. We want all 11 million. They had a quote. Let me get to it. Oh, I hope I get to it. No borders, no nations, stop deportations. No borders, no nations, stop deportations. Say it. No borders, no nations. Ooh, stop deportations. They don't want anybody deported. They think America should be a free-for-all.
Here for your encouragement and your walk with God. This is David Wolin with Haven Ministries, inviting you to anchor your day in God's Word. People like to think they know where they're going in life, that if they want something badly enough, they can go out and chase their dreams and find fulfillment. Now, of course, it's wonderful to have the freedom to make your own choices in life. Not everybody in this world gets that. But what I described is also not how the Bible describes the life of a person who follows after God. Take Psalm 119. It says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path." And why do we need light? Well, it's because the path is dark. We don't know what lies ahead. Only God does. But He's given us His Spirit and His Word to give us light for the journey. Try out Anchor Devotional in print every month. Just visit getanchor.com.
Hi, Carl Kirby with Reasons for Hope here, and we're talking about butterflies. Most people know that a butterfly starts off as a caterpillar, which is an insanely interesting creature. Did you know that a caterpillar eats 7 times its weight every day for 12 days? That's 3,000 times its birth weight. If an 8-pound baby did the same, it would have to eat 168,000 Big Macs. That'd be a big baby. We're talking about an exceptionally elite eating machine. It's basically a stomach with jaws and legs. That makes the Nathan's hot dog eating champion look like a lightweight. Joey Chestnut, you can't hang. It eats so fast and furiously, it literally outgrows its skin 4 to 5 times during its super short life. When the eating is over, it sheds its skin once more and hangs from a leaf before it forms a chrysalis and melts into a gelatinous goo. Fact is, there's no greater mystery in nature than a caterpillar turning into soup than turning into a butterfly. For more information, check us out at rforh.com. Stay bold.
Hello, Americans. I'm Todd Starnes with news and commentary next. Football is a de facto religion across the southern states. That's especially true in Alabama, where they worship the Crimson Tide and War Eagles on Saturday, and they worship the Almighty on Sunday. And on Friday night, God meets gridiron at high school football games. Just before the marching band plays the national anthem, someone in the press box tells everyone to stand, remove their hats, and bow their heads. And then a teenager takes the microphone to offer an invocation. But that tradition has come to an end in Lee County, Alabama. The school district announced student-led prayers are no longer allowed. The Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a complaint. They say the prayers are unconstitutional. Instead of fighting back, the school district capitulated, opting instead for a moment of silence. In other words, they took the coward's way out. You can read more about this story on toddstarnes.com. I'm Todd Starnes.
The Hamilton Corner podcast and 1-minute commentaries are available at afr.net and urbanfamilytalk.com. Back to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner. We will get to the phone line. The number is 888-589-8840. If you want to be a part of the program, once again, that number is 888-589-8840. I made the earlier statement about lawlessness begetting lawlessness, and I can't understand for the life of me. And I said this before, we need people who not only will proclaim conservative conclusions, but we need people who will articulate the conservative position on issues. I cannot understand for the life of me why there's no one on the conservative side in the mainstream or in the political structure who would say, listen, we granted amnesty in the 80s. So if we do the math, the people, and let me say this before, the so-called dreamers, they're not babies. The average age of the so-called dreamers is 22 years old. The program allows for people up to 31 prior to the launch date in 2012, and it also allows for those who are older than 31 if they had already started a process to reapply. So stop with the foolishness saying that these are the little bitty babies. They're not children anymore. Let's just be honest about that. And I can't understand why nobody else will articulate the fact that under Ronald Reagan, amnesty was granted in the 80s, and you just do a little bit of math, you recognize, well, what happens when you have amnesty granted in the 80s, you have a lot of the so-called dreamers are children of those who are illegal in the first grant of amnesty. Lawlessness begets lawlessness. So what do you think is going to happen thereafter? I mean, come on. When the DACA program is announced, people were hitting the highway trying to get to the states illegally. Which, as an aside, if America is such a horribly racist and despicable country, why do so many people who have brown skin like mine and darker keep trying to hightail it to get here? And many of them, when they get here, they thrive and succeed. Could it be that the perception of America being a horrible, dastardly place where there's no upward mobility, could it be it's nothing more than a sociological, not sociological, a perceived concept in your mind? People come here not even knowing the language but thrive. But those who are born and raised here say, oh, it's a horrible place that they have their thumb on me. Man, come on. Miss me with that foolishness. If somebody can come to America with skin darker as mine or darker and thrive and not even know the language, you can't tell me you can't thrive when you've been born and raised here. I'm just going to tell you like it is. But back to my point, getting to these dreamers, and I'm going to get to the phone lines. I take high offense to the fact that people who have come here, and again, those who are dreamers or whatever, it's not their fault that they're illegal in the country. Their parents brought them here. Granted, no argument there. But does that mean they should be rewarded because their parents were lawbreakers? I had a story, and I shared it on the Hamilton Corners Facebook page a couple weeks ago, where the University of Miami started a program called You Dreamers in 2016. That was while the DACA program was still in operation, and it still is in operation now, for at least until the 6-month time period given by President Trump expires, unless Congress acts. But they started this You Dreamer program in 2016 that allows for the so-called dreamers to get over $62,000 in financial aid. And you want to know what the basic qualification is for this program? Simply that they're the parents of lawbreakers. And I'm saying, not only are we going to allow lawlessness, now we're going to reward lawlessness? Are you serious? So would you apply that same criteria to American descendants of lawbreakers? Where you go to the prison and where all the prisoners' children can get scholarships to go to the University of Miami? When they started the You Dreamers program in 2016, it applied only to high school seniors in Miami-Dade County. Well, they now have expanded the program to apply to all illegals who fall into the range of the dreamers in the state of Florida who are high school seniors. And it also applies to those who may be enrolled in college elsewhere to transfer into Miami. Over $62,000 a year. And the reason why I take great issue, so you're only a dreamer if you are the descendant of a criminal illegal alien. That is what makes you a dreamer. Well, what about all the Americans? I'm not a dreamer. What about my kids? Can my kids go to the University of Miami? Can they get $62,000 a year in scholarships? It demeans the American people. It says, oh no, you're not good enough because you're born here and raised in America. But if you happen to be brought here when you were 9 months old, and you're 25 years old now, here's $60,000 to go to the University of Miami. I'm sick of the foolishness. To where everything that is anti-American is celebrated and worthy of public laudation. But if you actually are an American, you love God, you love this country, you're an upstanding citizen, you obey the laws, you become the one at the back of the bus. That's disgusting. That's disgusting. And you have Nancy Pelosi falling over herself for these dreamers, so-called dreamers, who they're demonstrating to you the great appreciation and affinity that they have for our country, where they'll shut down a congresswoman's attempt to meet with her constituency. And yet everybody's okay with this. Everybody's okay with this. Listen, we cannot afford to confuse compassion with sound policy. If we as a country make the decision to reward lawlessness, we will put ourselves in a position for more lawlessness. Call me crazy, but I think people who bust their tails, getting up at 4 and 5 in the morning, working hard to put food on the table for their children, working hard to comply with the laws of our country, I think they are dreamers. I think they have a dream. I think my mom, who was born and raised in the Desire Project in New Orleans, Louisiana, she was a dreamer, born as an unwed, high school dropout, single mom. I think she was a dreamer. And by all intents and purposes, and by all statistics, my mom should have never been able to do anything. But you know what happened? The gospel of Jesus Christ changed the trajectory of my family. Because the Lord snatched my mom and my dad, they now have grandchildren who know the Lord. You can't tell me my mom couldn't have used $62,000 in scholarship money. But yet we're going to reward this. Listen, and I know I'm on level 10. But I'm trying to explain this with all the passion that I have, because there are nefarious forces that want to rip the fabric of our country away from us while we watch. It is not discompassionate to say we will not reward lawlessness. It's not discompassionate. It's not a lack of compassion to say, listen, thank God that you're able to make something out of your life. Thank God that you were able to turn something around out of a bad situation for yourself. But we cannot reward you with lawlessness. These are lessons my father taught me as a child. Abraham, it doesn't matter if you win, if you cheat. If you cheat, it's not a win. It's not a win. Yet we have people who want to skip the line. And listen, the immigration process, it does need to be reformed. Let's reform that. But let's not become a country that rewards lawlessness and do so by trampling on the American people. I can think of a whole host of different people that could use $60,000 in scholarship money so their kids can go to college. I can think of a whole host. The University of Miami says their ultimate goal is to be able to offer these scholarships to dreamers from the entire country. And you want to tell me this is only about the dreamers? I'm telling you guys now, you heard it here. The issue with DACA will not end with DACA. It is a Trojan horse to open the door to unfettered illegal immigration. I'm telling you, the people who want this foolishness, they have no desire for borders. That's why you heard these so-called dreamers, when they shut down Nancy Pelosi's event, they said no borders, no nations, stop deportations. They want Nancy Pelosi to help defund ICE. They want to completely get rid of any type of border distinction between our nations and other nations. We cannot be so foolish that we allow the emotional mamby-pamby sentiments of the popular culture to move us away from sound principle. That's why I'm so frustrated with the Republicans in that in the political establishment. It's ridiculous. It seems like every time the Democrats uproot themselves from their left-leaning positions and go further left, the Republicans are all too ready to sprint to reoccupy that left-leaning position. When did it become a Republican talking point to celebrate top-down government-run insurance, healthcare insurance? When did it become a Republican talking point to say, hey, forget our borders, forget our language, forget our culture. Let's just go ahead and just, allow illegal lawlessness to be rewarded. And that shows that we have big hearts. That's not big hearts. The Apostle Paul said, you have a zeal, but not according to knowledge. When we allow our compassion to be unfettered from truth, we put ourselves in position for that compassion to be manipulated for nefarious goals. We have to wake up. I hear people saying that, well, it's a political loser to say you don't want to help the dreamers. It's not a political loser to stand up and say, listen, lawlessness begets lawlessness. At some point, we have to stand up and say, our nation is our nation. At some point, we have to teach personal responsibility and say, listen, thank God that you made something out of your lives. You're 22, 25, 30 years old now. You've been able to benefit from our freedom, from our safety, from our educational institutions. You've been able to aid to the culture. Now do the next thing and make yourself a lawful citizen. Here's the process. What's wrong with that? That's not a lack of compassion. That's understanding. In order to preserve a republic long term, we have to be a nation of laws. Lawlessness is not synonymous with compassion. It's not mean. I'm not saying we become hostile. Those that have gotten educations, those that have served in our military, these are factors that can be taken into consideration as to how we reform the legal immigration process. But to lay down the carpet, kick open the gate and say, you know what, and even though you've done, the only thing that distinguishes you from American citizens is that you are not a citizen and you were brought here not of your own volition. And so now you not only welcome them, but you roll out the red carpet. Shame on the University of Miami. I know people in Miami. I have family members who migrated to the country legally. They won't be able to benefit from a $60,000 scholarship? Come on, man. To the phone lines. First, we'll go to Delaware, Ohio, to Joe. Joe, thank you so much for your patience and holding. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Oh, thank you for what you do. You're on a roll there. You stole a couple of my points. I'll just reiterate them. Yeah, after 8 years of Obama doing nothing and 8 years of Bush doing nothing and 8 years of Clinton doing nothing, you know, the liberals are going to spin this, that you're breaking up families, you're taking babies from their parents. The average age of the dreamer is now over 22 years of age. The average dreamer is over 22 years old. The average wage of the dreamer is over $17 an hour. How many Americans do you know? I'd forgotten you made a good point on the free college education, the free medical care, food stamps, welfare, everything they're getting for free. The average wage of the dreamer is over $17 an hour. How many unemployed and underemployed Americans over the age of 22 do you know would like to be making over $17 an hour? It's undermining the middle class of America, and it's got to end, or we're doomed. I mean, there's no other way around it.
Joe, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I know I went a little long. I got a bank full of calls. I'm going to go next to Barrington, Kansas, where we have April on the line. April, welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you. I wanted to make a comment about the fact that, to me, the wiretapping done on that person in the Trump Tower, that was his aide, I forgot his name, Manafort? Is that his
Paul
name?
Manafort. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, to me, this is Obamagate, just like we had Watergate with Nixon. As far as I'm concerned, it's Obamagate.
Great point, April. Great point. I mean, you have a sitting president who, at a minimum, is presiding over a political opponent being spied on. Potentially. And we don't know all the evidence. We don't know the content of the wiretap recordings, but we know that they exist. And yet, everyone in the Talking Snake media is okay with this? If they can do that to a presidential candidate, what does that say for the American people? Back to the phone lines. We'll go next to Dallas, Texas, where Dean is on the line. Dean, thank you for holding. Welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, for taking my call. I really appreciate your show, and you are finally someone who is actually saying it like it really is. That's what they're up to. We need to get them 11 million illegals out of this country. TACA has nothing to do with it. It's not a legal program in the first place. It was penned by Barack Obama. It never went through the Congress. So they actually 18. We need to send Trump some help. We need to get rid of these liberals. We need to get rid of the moderates, as they call themselves, which is nothing but a liberal running on the Republican ticket. We're going to have to get him some help because him and Sessions need to get started and get their feet on the ground. They've let all this stuff get ahead of them, and we need these people gone.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you very much. Listen, I made the point earlier. DACA was one portion of the overall DREAM Act. The only reason why the DAPA, the provision for the parents, were stopped, it was because of a lawsuit in federal court. There was a federal court ruling that deemed it unconstitutional. So you actually already know what the intent is. It is ultimately amnesty across the board. Lawlessness begets lawlessness. We'll try to get two more calls in. We'll go next to Mobile, Alabama, where we have Jacob. Jacob, I'll give you 30 seconds. Go right ahead, my man.
All right, how you feel, brother?
I'm fired up, Jacob, I have to tell you.
I hear you. But see, one thing that it is, this country, just like with the children of Israel, this is the promised land. Sometimes we've been here so long, we don't realize how people from the outside see it. They will sell their soul, they'll lie, cheat, and steal to get here.
I got to hop in right there, Jacob. You're absolutely right. One more, Buddy in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Buddy, you got 15 seconds. Go right ahead.
The solution is simple. We give the foreign countries a 4-to-1 deal. We bring in a working Hispanic or a working person from another country, and we ship out 4 lazy Americans who won't take advantage of the jobs that are available in the United States.
Got to jump in right there, buddy. Thank you for your call and your comments. Listen, guys, I'm not mad at anybody except Satan and those who allow him to use them. And there are people who are spineless weasels who have the metrics of power, but they refuse to use it for constitutional lawful purposes.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not